So brilliant. Thank you very much for allowing me to join. What I'm going to do is talk probably for the next 20 odd minutes. So hopefully I'll keep your attention for that long. This is all about psychological health management. I'm not going to touch so much on the physical health, although there's another program that we run for that. But this is about really a case study of a journey that we've been on in Thames since 2013. And I'll show you the outcomes. Now, I very much appreciate and understand that within your own organizations, you will have psychological health management strategies of your own, but perhaps some of what we've done through this case study will trigger some very different ways of thinking for yourselves, okay? And this presentation's been delivered to a number of, well, probably circa 50 organizations of various size and complexity. And also many of the MPs, including the Health Minister at Hancock recently, and a lot of the Lords. So you're getting it firsthand. Thames Water in a nutshell, I always like to start with this slide. You know, we have a quarter of the UK's population that we serve in terms of customers. And I think the bottom tab always does it for me. We break ground 10,000 times a month on our network. So the sheer volume of risk that we hold as an organisation with 7,000 sites is pretty complex and diverse. But the one thing that always fascinates me is obviously the input and importance of psychological health. And that statement there is true of any organisation. There is no one single initiative that will have a profound impact. We must be relentless over consecutive years, and this is what this journey is all about. So in terms of strategy, when I arrived at Thames at the back end of 2012, health wasn't really discussed at the executive and the board table in any sort of meaningful way. So putting together a strategy, what I've done within the presentation is wrap a number of video links within it so that you'll have a copy of it and you can have a look at the videos in your own time, yeah? I'm only going to show one later on. But our strategy is called Time to Talk, and it's all around mind fit. Equally, we have body fit, which is our physical health strategy. The first thing that was needed to be done was it needed to be wrapped into the executive and board level. So the KPIs, I'll talk about the health performance indicators in a second, HPIs that we have. But really what was being discussed, how did I get the executive and the board to start to think about psychological health in a very different way, including there was very injury focused. So we needed to shift that. So we had what's called parity of esteem, equally speaking about health and safety in the right way. And it's included in the company annual report. And I'll show you what's happened with the regulator in a bit. Our supply chain, 2/3 of our business is delivered by our supply chain partners, working for or on our behalf. And we have a suite of contractual obligations that we call essential standards. The link there is to the Health and Safety Hub. That's an external website where you can view all our literature, our management system, all our essential standards. Number 22 is called Managing Occupational Health and Wellbeing. So any organisation bidding work for us, any on our framework supply chain, they all have to work and comply to our essential standards and are audited in line with that. It's a great way of being able to set the tone throughout the organisations that work for and on our behalf. This is a maturity model that we put together in 2013. Down the left-hand side under Workplace Worker and Wellbeing, you'll see a suite of 10 HPIs, health performance indicators. And across the top, you've got infancy to integrated. And the way it works is obviously like most maturity models, you look at what we have a series of compliance statements, which are in the boxes. And then behind that is actually, when you click on it, is actually a set of 5 questions. And it's physical and psychological health. And actually allows you, when you tick each of the questions, to move to the next level in the box. As you can imagine, when I first introduced this to my tier 1 organizations that work for on my behalf and said, why don't you all complete this and let's see where we presently stand? And everything came back all green, right? Which is obviously a bit of a worry. So then we completed it as an organization, and we were way down in the minimal levels and legal levels of compliance, which is down the left-hand side. And this is where we are today. So it's a great way to be able to set the tone of what's important to you, but also allow you then to actually allow organizations to self-assess themselves. We also wrap this into our procurement contracts. So the water industry works in 5-year cycles. And this allows us to actually, within those framework organizations that we're setting up, the framework partners, people bidding for those frameworks, they have to actually complete this. So when they come in for interview, I've got what they've scored themselves around physical and psychological health. Works very well. That's all available, and again on that external website that we have. In terms of competency upskilling, many organizations have started to really get on board now with psychological health management and education around it. We looked at it very differently back in 2013, and I remember the conversation with my my training team saying, I don't want to be sat in a room watching the effects of stress happen to somebody else on a screen. I want to feel the effects of negative mental stressors. That was the challenge and the vision set to them. So they went away and had a look at different things. Virtual reality at the time was in place. It was being used, but it wasn't being used in a course setting in the right way. So if you imagine VR, you have to have 2 points set up, and then you have to stay between the 2 points, and you get given a handheld device, and then you can actually do things. But that doesn't work in a course setting because you can't set it up in a course environment and have one person at a time. So what we did was we built the synchronized system. We actually filmed and pieced together footage and actually filmed. So when you enter our courses now, you're actually given your literature, you're given your headset. I've got one here. So nowadays, and you're given it, so that's part of your course material, yeah? And actually when you then, in the course, what happens is the instructor is able to say during a session on, we're talking about lifestyle stresses at home, and he says, right, everybody don your headsets, presses a button, and everybody's immersed at the same time into the same scenario, comes out the other side, and the conversations are so much richer and deeper. Back then we had phones in it. Nowadays this is a Wi-Fi connection, so it goes directly to the laptop. It's very, very simple to do, and nowadays can really change the way course training is delivered. And we put everybody from the health secretary right through the Lords and MPs through that as well, along with many major organisations. Unfortunately, it's never been replicated. It's still today, we have 2 courses, a half-day Mindfit Awareness and a 2-day Mental Health First Aid course. And it's within all those, so all my people have gone through it. The next is creating a culture of care. Yeah? So a big part of it is how we moved the way we approach psychological health reviews. So if you imagine, the best way I put it to my executive was, you guys all, we have an injury, yeah, that leads to loss, somebody off work as a result of it, absence. You have an investigation, we have an executive review, and we have learning coming out the back end. Why wouldn't we do the same for anybody off work as a result of illness? Yeah, and that really shifted the mindset around it. Yeah, so the first person after that in 2013 who went off work with psychological health as a result of work-induced illness. It was very uncomfortable for the executives around the room to be sat there discussing this. But the reality is, if somebody goes off work unwell, you have a legal and moral obligation to make sure you prevent a recurrence, regardless. So we have to do that, you know, and it's such a significant change in terms of how things are discussed in the right way and the right context. Might be something you want to think about. Social media platforms have become rife within society in a good way, I believe. Okay, now then, likes, everybody likes likes, I like everything. And the reality is we have a Yammer, we use our social media platform, and you know, thousands of our people are on Yammer every day. What I wanted to show you was how we really use this in a very different way. So this is some of the stats, right? Last year, 8,000 messages uploaded, but read 1.1 million times. So now you start to think about the impact of social media in business. And I have 2 forums around psychological health. The first is Mental Health First Aiders Group. So I have 1 in 10 MHFAs. So they built within the teams. That means I have a connected community, a closed group, and it enables me to proactively feed messages that I want to drip feed into the teams. But it also allows them to actually communicate with my clinical health team and actually raise issues. The other is a wider mental health, public mental health group that everybody is on sharing stuff. The great thing I've seen about social media and business is the etiquette side. I've yet to see in several years of us really ramping up on this, negative messages coming through. So the haters you find in general society do not exist within the corporate world. It just naturally doesn't happen. Okay, it's really interesting, but that shows you the power of influence in it. Everybody in Thames gets a free annual personal confidential medical assessment. The conversation around the executive table and the way I put it to my executive was, back in 2013, we all get our Bupa annual medicals. Is that because we are more important than the receptionist downstairs or the plant fitter out on the site? Because we're senior managers. We'd have to be an idiot at that point to say yes. The reality is we are not any more important. And we pay 50 quid to MOT our vehicles, and we say our people are our most valuable asset. So why wouldn't we pay the same £50 to make sure there's an annual medical for our people that gives them their present condition? And so the personal medical assessments were born. We went beyond that then and worked into our supply chain. And I have a health and safety leadership team, which is tier 1 organizational representatives that control the essential standards. And anybody working on our capital framework within our projects and anybody on our operational frameworks all get a medical assessment. And I remember back at the time, many saying to the contractors who work for on our behalf that, you know, if you won't provide it, we will provide it for your employees. And it soon embarrassed a number of them into doing it. But what was interesting was we had organizations like Skanska, for example, whose people were on our contract getting medical assessments, but they didn't get it in the wider organization. So, you know, what you can do as a client in terms of setting the tone and making sure these things happen. We've had some staggering results. We do cancer screening. You know, I've had 108 people abnormal results for bowel and prostate cancer. You know, many people, 14 confirmed cases that I'm aware of. These are confidential. These are the people that have phoned me up and said, thanks very much, I've got cancer. And as much as that conversation is difficult at the time, the reality is they are thanking you because they've caught it early. We have a lot of people that have been diagnosed, caught early, and are still in work because they're getting radiotherapy as opposed to chemo. It's very, very interesting what's happening. One of the things that happens before that is we have a self-assessment based around work and life. Pascal is a unit of pressure, for those of you that are engineers, like me. And this really does help our organization individuals to do a self-assessment. So when they go in to have their face-to-face medical with a professional, they're able to talk about some of the lifestyle stressors. It also enables me to actually understand whether the investment needs to go as a result of the physical assessments that are undertaken and the Pascal work-life balance, but also the medical psychological assessments that we undertake. So I can channel and steer investments. So last year we had financial health as a big drive within the company because that was one of the dominating factors under Pascal. Okay. The next, sharing illustrative stories. So we have a magazine called The Source, which is our workplace magazine that goes to all our people and our contractors. And it's really interesting. I remember back 5-6 years ago, actually having a conversation with, in the early days, we didn't have a culture where openness thrived. Nowadays, you know, sports personalities, celebrities, royals speak more openly about their mental health. Thus, society is speaking more openly about mental health. Society's in business, so you need to embrace that. We captured it very early on, and the chap on the left there, one of my friends, Danny, who's a communications executive with me, actually shared his own personal story about depression. And that happens more and more now, and people are willing to share their stories. On the right-hand side, using illustrated stories via stunts, for want of a better word, but the video will show you a YouTube video that BBC took of us. That's 12 Men Talking, it was called. And it's to signify the 12 men that take their lives every day within the UK. And trust me when I say that getting off a canoe onto a paddleboard in the centre of the River Thames is extremely challenging. But what we're getting at is looking for the opportunities to be able to capitalise on stories that resonate with our people. And 3 months after this, I had 3 people come forward with suicidal thoughts to my mental health first aiders, and we're getting help and support. So it does show the impact. This is a very brief video I want to show you because we regularly stimulate the senses through using videos, educational videos. I produce one every quarter and that goes out across the company. And this is a very simple way of doing it. Less than £5 but it shows you what can be done.
Step back and watch me do it. If you listen what I'm saying, I walk you through it. Jay Holmes, John Needy, all night, all day, ain't looking through it. Who knew it? Yeah.
Whoa, can I help you? We're John's mates. Is he around? Have you seen Richie?
Yeah, he's over there.
All right, John?
Oh, you're all right, lads.
Why don't you have a sit down, mate?
1 in 4 of us will fight mental health problems this year.
You can do this, John. We're with you. We just thought we'd ask you how you're doing.
Having a colleague in your corner can make all the difference.
Yeah, mate, we're with you.
So if your colleague's acting differently, step in and support them. At Thames Water, we have a responsibility to keep each other safe and well whilst at work. So let's look out for each other.
A very simple way of really taking something that people understand and starting to drip feed educational messages. We even got Rob Brydon to do the voiceover there, you might have noticed, which was really good. It was a joke, it was me. So ensure support is available. So as I talked about MHFAs, it was really fascinating. Several years ago, we were trying to convince the regulator to actually change the guidance around first aid at work guidance that exists as part of the First Aid at Work Act. And the regulator wouldn't do it, the HSE, so we went to the minister and we applied pressure to the minister, who brought the HSE in, and there was 5 of us in a room and carved out the actual first aid guidance that is now a requirement for all organisations employing over 5 people to have the bottom right topics included within their first aid risk assessment for their office or their workplace. What it did was brought psychological health and mental health right to the forefront alongside balancing it with physical first aiders, and that's really helped, and I think this will only continue as time progresses. EAPs. I found that EAPs over the years have been underutilised within organisations, and partly because the model that's established within the EAP community, there's a level of trust in terms of employees thinking, will everything get found out by the organisation, but also the right support network. So this is a dynamic step model we had in place at Thames, and it allows that when somebody rings into EAP, an assessment to be made that allows them to get the right level of care. And as you go through that dynamic step model, you can see how the level of support and care gets more complex as somebody's ailment or condition requires it. And remember, it's all about keeping people in work. Yeah. So a lot of people ask me, do you differentiate between work or non-work related? Well, the answer is no, in reality. And much of the initiatives we put in place serve to support people regardless of whether it happens in work or it doesn't. For instance, free physio, we give everybody in Thames free physio. Stop smoking campaigns, because it's all about keeping the employees in work. Okay. We're getting to, I think I'm doing okay for time. What am I doing? Yeah. The Prime Minister's review. So you will have heard, hopefully, about what's called the Thriving at Work. This is a cabinet office. We brought them down to Thames, put them through the VR, but also we started to talk to them really about mental health within business. That was part of Lord Stevenson's review. Dennis and I sat at length around this and how we would shape it. And all I've done here, you should be aware of the document. I've got a link to the document anyway. But on the left-hand side, to simplify it for organisations, I've got what they say. There's 6 core standards and 4 enhanced standards within this large 80-page document. But it's what they say and what we do. So it's only a snapshot of what we do, but it's a nice, simple way to enable organisations to start to look at, are we compliant with the Prime Minister's Thriving at Work standards? Yep. And Theresa and I discussed this at length last year, and she was really pleased that so many organisations had actually moved forward in terms of their psychological health support. I'll show you what that looks like in terms of how we've took that into industry in a second. But this was the next one, working with the DWP to create a framework around business reporting on mental health. It was released a couple of years ago, December 2018, but the reality was it was all about within annual reports, what do we expect to see from organisations? Right now it's voluntary reporting for business. I expect that, and what we're working with at the minute under what's called the Inclusive Economy Partnership for the Cabinet team is actually moving that to a position where we've got a requirement, such as what we have with financial accounts at the minute. Yeah. So annual reports will be a requirement to report on disabilities, etc., physical and mental. Supporting campaigns. I think one of the things that we do, we've started to do very well within Thames, is actually look at what campaigns are coming up and what can we get involved with. That's one of our water towers, a very iconic one in Shepherd's Bush, and we wrapped our heads together around it for the marathon in 2017. But it gives you a flavour of, we're always looking for, we also supported the Royal Foundation's work with Mind around the Mental Health at Work Gateway, which is the links there that you can have a look at. I talked about the compliance survey. So if you imagine thriving at work is the ultimate goal to get organisations to actually put in place mental health strategies and practices. So we benchmarked ourselves and our tier 1 supply chain organisations in Thames early last year, and said, right, where are we against this? And that allowed us to see where we were compliant as an organisation after all the work we're doing. We then took that on and did, this is the water industry clients, so these are all my peers. And to give you a bit of a joke here, this was in Scotland, and the second person on the right there is me. And look like me because I had a wig on, but in reality, this is all my peers who lead the water industry organisations across the UK. And we benchmarked all our organisations against the Thriving at Work standards. We all met in Scotland. I presented the outcomes of that review, and it allowed us to be able to say as an industry, here's where we are in terms of our position of compliance. In the top right, you can see that against the core and enhanced standards. But also there, where organisations were lower scoring, we allowed it to connect to peers to actually see what we needed to do more on. We plan to repeat that this year. Finally, there's the national highways sector. So again, we looked at the highways sector and said, right, how do we benchmark the highways sector against Thriving at Work standards? We did that last year. We had a great launch event with Dennis at the Houses of Parliament. And that was the outcome of the review. So you can see there the challenges of a national highway sector in terms of where they are. But it was always a gateway to say, here's where you are, and we're looking to do the same again this year. And right now, we are about to kick off the survey for the same thing on the insurance sector and also the Ports Authority, the PLA. So if that's a snapshot of a psychological health program, what I wanted to do is show you how we monitor and make visible what we're doing. So if everything of the inputs, you can see 2013, 14, 15, 16, all I've done here is try to capture, so you can have a look in your own time, some of the initiatives that were put in place over those years, the direct initiatives. And that continues to this day. In 2019-20, we've just finished up our program. I haven't got the photographs in, I don't know why they've not come out. But then looking forward to the next 5 years, the water industry works in 5-year cycles, as I said, because of the price review. What are we doing for the next 5 years? And what are we doing in particular this year? This is how it impacted some of the lagging indicators. So the outcomes, education increased exponentially and doubled. Challenges of unhealthy and unsafe acts and conditions reported went through the roof. So this is then your culture about people speaking, challenging openly without fear of reprisal. There's 2 reasons people don't challenge. Firstly, they don't feel empowered. Is it my responsibility? And secondly, and more importantly, fear of reprisal. What's the person on the other side going to say if I call them out and actually say something? And we had fighting on the sites in 2013. You know, it was real, not the place you wanted to work. Fast forward to where we are today, 80,000 unsafe acts and conditions and unhealthy behaviours that have been reported on the system. And although that number is huge, what it's about is that culture of human beings, yeah? Slips and lapses in concentration, we make errors in judgment, we have frustrations, you know, we have boiling points of frustrations that sometimes explode. You know, it's a reality of being a human. And what we say is that's okay. Nobody will get in trouble for reporting an unhealthy or unsafe act or condition in this company. And it's really, really a fine balance on that. The inspection visibility went up, and importantly, the corrective actions being closed. So work underway that we monitor to close out anything that's raised as an action. You will all, I'm sure, within your companies have what's called an injury frequency rate. This is ours, yeah, over the last 5 years, since 2013 to 18, that 5-year case study program. And it continues to this day, and we've seen a decrease. And if I overlay the safety interventions that we've done in terms of initiatives, this not to do with this presentation, but you can see is the same philosophy. So these are all safety to reduce injuries, right? And there's a lot more than this, but it gives you an idea on that timeline, yeah? Now then, this is what you probably won't have within your organizations, but perhaps it could be some thinking that you move towards. So back in 2013, I had hundreds of people off work as a result of psychological illness, work-induced. So this is work creating an environment where people have become harmed, yeah? We've had the same, if I overlay the health initiatives that you've just seen on those 4-box diagrams, this is a snapshot of some of the health initiatives that have started to create that culture of care and reduce the actual volume of people off work as a result of psychological illness. And the wow is well over winter, not wow, look at our stats. Okay? All right. Finally, the silent voice of the majority. We often are blinded by the vocal minority within organizations through perhaps vocal trade union partnerships. So the reality is you have to have a cultural review. Ours is called Here For You. And there's 50 business questions, as you would have in most organizations. But what I'm pleased about is you can see our response rate is 80%, right? So it's quite a good culture in terms of people responding out of all our employees. And interestingly, the last 4 years in succession, health and safety taken seriously at Thames Water is a top scoring question. Now, before we put all this intervention in place, it was nowhere near getting anywhere near the top. That's been a really credible journey. So what the silent majority, the thousands and thousands of people are telling us is, well done, you know, you're doing the right job, keep going. That's the main thing out of this. That should be 20 minutes, 23, apologies.
Karl, thank you. And I'm going to open the floor to questions in a second, but the piece that really sits with me is one, the patience and the longitudinal effort. And if we map that onto the innovation piece that we're talking, or well-being, or any cultural change, it has to happen root and branch. So it's not just good enough for, and I'm looking at the screen of our participants, it's not just good enough for our participants to make that leap. It's about how do we shift it throughout the system? How do you make it as important for the person at the front desk to be, in this case, able to talk about their mental health or be able to come up with innovation as it is to those in the boardroom? And that really, really struck me. Thank you. Questions? We've got about 10 minutes and then we're going to put you into great breakout groups to make sure that you start to think about this through those 3 lenses that we sent you yesterday. But before that, yeah, go for it, Simon.
Oh, the medical assessments, are they kind of voluntary? We've started doing them at work and offering them to everyone every 3 years. Which is something that's funded through kind of the Electricians Union, the Joint Industry Board, but we've actually kind of found take-up disappointingly low. So we're kind of, without forcing people to have a kind of occupational health, and it actually covers psychological as well as standard health checks. How have you overcome that, or is it something you expect your staff to do?
So the first year that we introduced it, I think it was a trust issue more than anything, because you know, you've got a workforce that's been with us a long time, and suddenly the organisation saying, hey, go for this medical assessment. It's free and it's confidential and it's just for you. But there'll always be a watch and brief where people go, well, really, what's the company after you? You know, are they trying to find out something I've got? And in reality, as the years have progressed, our take-up has increased exponentially. So right now, last year, we were at 65% take-up within the organisation. Which, you know, I would love it to be higher, but, you know, several thousand of our people are taking the opportunity to go and do the medicals.
Yeah, thanks.
But again, that goes back to that culture of care, we call it, but really trust and integrity. So, you know, if I'm on a screen, we run live events on Teams. So the last one was last week. We had 3,500 people on it from across the company, and it was a specific COVID one, but prior to that we had a specific health and safety one for what we're doing this year. And, you know, when I'm on there with the chairman saying, and everybody watching saying, personal medical assessments will be happening and please go ahead and do them. They are confidential. They are, suddenly, as you know, you break down those levels and barriers of trust and integrity, which people might be worried about.
Yeah. Okay.
Sarah, you're on mute.
Persistence and transparency. What other questions? I'm watching the screen. Yeah, go for it. I've got Andrew and then Mandy.
When you first started this, I'd imagine Thames Water has quite a large board of people to actually get on board. Did you find there was some resistance to start off with? I mean, mental health has been very high on a lot of companies' agendas, probably over the past sort of 2-3 years. But back when you were, if you like, pioneering it and introducing it, was there quite a lot of resistance, and did you have to do quite a hard sell to get people on board?
I think back then it was tough. Back then, I won't say it otherwise, but when I was newly brought into the company, and what was interesting was in 2010 to 2012, Thames Water had 3 fatalities. Yeah. So I was brought in to turn around the health and safety performance within the organisation. And by that, people meant stop injuries, Karl. But when I came in and actually explained to them, a lot of the injuries, we had hundreds of people off work as a result of physical injuries. And when I explained to them, a lot of the contributing factors to the injuries were psychologically health driven. And then you start to explain that in a way through drawing it and diagrams on a board that, I mean, human beings, I talked about slips and lapses in concentration, errors in judgment, because we humans, we make mistakes. And as much as you can put in safe systems of work and bring in collective measures of control, the reality is we will always be reliant on humans and their psychology and frame of mind at the point where they're in work. A big contributing factor to why people are making those mistakes was the fact of worries, through financial worries, through health worries, through all sorts of things that were contributing to that. And I said, if you have a balance, safety and health, physical and psychological, program in place, you will naturally start to affect both illness and injury off work. And you know, the executive team, you know, when you're new into a company, you do have a bit of grace in terms of being able to beat the drum a bit harder than if somebody's been there quite a long period of time. But really, they were receptive. The chief executive of the time, Martin Baggs, was really receptive towards get going. You know, we need to sort this out. What do we need to do? Then I combined that with putting explanation and education for the executive and board was one side, but then also combining it with the statistics that were backing things up. So, you know, once you put on the table that we had hundreds of people off as a result of psychological ill health that we were doing nothing about, you know, you can't, as an executive member, then turn around and go, well, yeah, we're not having the conversations. And what I explained to them was, there's a lot of talk at the time about, well, you can't say anything because it's medical. We're not allowed to talk about it. Absolute nonsense. If you are creating an environment and you are creating somebody unwell as a result of work, you have to do something about it. I mean, because what's going to happen? They're going to come back into the workplace and everything's the same. We wouldn't do it for injury. So we broke a lot of the stigmas back then around what was able to be discussed. I have a rule of thumb in the company. Any organizations that I've led, I always have, for every 1,000 employees, I'll have a clinical health specialist. So I have 6 occupational health professionals who are all ex-A&E nurses. They're clinical health professionals, and there's a balance between them of physical and also mental health. Nurses get educated via a bias. They get the general nursing, and then they go towards different biases. So several of mine are mental health nurses. And what that did as well was enable us to connect with the operations and the individuals, so we had a level of support that's very, very different.
Thank you, Mandy.
Well, apart from saying, you know, thank you very much, it was probably the wrong words to use, but it was actually quite mind-blowing to go through all the things that you've done, and yeah, kind of where we as an organisation absolutely should go. I mean, I suppose the one benefit we will have, well enough, today is the day that we've announced to our team that I'll be taking over as MD. So I should have the board on board in going this. So that first hurdle we shouldn't have. But kind of the issues I think we will have is we've only got 50 staff.
Yeah.
So it's a case, like you say, for every 1,000 people, you've got a nurse, or you've got this. So for us, it'll be a case of have the budget. And my view will be, well, it's kind of we can't afford not to. But I think at the same time, there will be restrictions on what we can do. Like some of those things that you're doing, absolutely amazing videos. But for us, for instance, to do a video of £5,000 is probably 20% of my annual budget for. So it's a case for me to take away what you've got there, I suppose, and try and find free or borrow things that other people have done, and trying to work on perhaps what other people have done rather than be trailblazers ourselves. I think we have to incorporate perhaps the benefit of what other people have done. So that's kind of, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, any advice you could give on that to do it on the budget, really.
Yes, reach out, Mandy, without a doubt. You know, I've gone in front of 50 executive teams and main boards from Virgin's group up at Oxford. Richard invited me to his home to speak to all his leaders on a health management program. I was a bit gutted, actually, because after the phone I thought, Necker, brilliant.
I was going to say, did you go to Necker?
But unfortunately, it was Oxford. I mean, so, but the reality is, whether it's the big companies, I also spoke recently to a groundworks contracting organisation, an SME, and about what they could do within their organisation, because they were starting to work for us, you know, and said, oh, Thames is asking all these questions about mental health management. So, you know, reach out, and there's plenty of literature, and sometimes there's too much, and it's about making it tangible, sitting around with your team and saying, right, what do we want to do this year? So it may be you put 5 people, which you can get free of charge, on mental health first aid courses. Then you've got 1 in 10. That's a massive thing to comply with the Thriving at Work best practice. Yeah. You know, you can do simple things in your strategy that won't blow the budget mind-blowing, and can really make quite an impactful difference.
Yeah.
The biggest impact is you, by the way, Mandy.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think as a business, actually, our culture is actually quite good. So I think we're quite lucky in where we are as a business already. But yeah, for me, it's kind of one of the things that I feel I need to take that next, step in a positive way for everybody. So I think this the time's right. Also in a change of direction for the business, perhaps in some respect, this is kind of be a good thing for me to certainly implement more. I think it's done on a day-to-day basis rather than people seeing that there's a structure behind it, and I think that would be my challenge, really.
One of the things that I say to leaders is, often it's not what you say, but the absence of what you'd say. By that I mean, chief exec or an MD could be talking quite often about customer service and financial management, and different procurement, and there's nothing wrong with what they're saying, but if you don't regularly tap into the psychological health of the people and what they think about, so I make sure that our e-brief messages that go out weekly, every other one or every third one, we've got something in there where the CEO is talking about health and safety and health management and mental health and what's coming up. And that's really, really important, because often we forget to say that. It's like leaders and managers often forget to say thank you, great job, well done. You'd be amazed at the impact that can have on people.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Derek, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, it was just a quick question. It's something I wrote down, Karl, as you were presenting, about the fact that few companies or no other companies seem to have followed your lead on using that virtual reality side. And it's kind of, Mandy, following on from what you were saying, is the cost of producing those videos would be really expensive. And it was, Karl, would you be open to the idea of making available the system or the content so that other people, particularly obviously the guys on IFLP, the companies here, on a license basis or collaboratively creating something, so that if each of us put in our 5K, we could then all, whatever the budget looks like, but our contribution towards that cost, is that something you consider?
Can have it free of charge.
Great
answer. The reality is everything that we've done is free, and here you go. The only thing you'll have to purchase is these hardware to be able to put it in. So 12 of these are 250 each now. So, you know, you could set it up for a course setting. We have 12 people on our courses for our MindFit and our MHFAs. And the sync system that we have that was £6,000 for the synchronized system. It's come down in cost now, but back then we were building these things. So the laptop for the instructor, so there's the cost. And then the videos cost us, I think it was about 2K per video, because you're only filming. The people within our videos that people see are actually our employees. We always use our own employees and never act.
Great.
So you mean, and we combined it all together, and you mean, but nowadays, you know, that £1,000 and you get 5 sets of these in a nice fancy box, and the cost of stuff has come down quite extortionately reduced now. But yeah, in terms of the videos, you can have them. That's no worries. I mean, nowadays.
And Karl, I'm going to suggest on COVID restrictions, maybe you could hire those out if Mandy was for her 50s. If they're doing once a day, once a year, perhaps there's a way that you could maybe do that as well, rather than everyone having to buy the. Yeah,
we run a number of. I took the health and safety executive down to our digital HQ in Guildford. Also the all the Mind executive and board, and I put them through all the virtual reality, but not just the mental health. That was the end of it. I put them through virtual reality evolution. So we, you know, we had them, you know, up a massive tower, walk in a tower of terror. What we did. The reason we did that was we very quickly exposed anybody who would work at height issues. And you start, you mean, and then put people down. We can take people down our Victorian sewers. So VR's in my confined spaces courses now, so we can simulate, and we take people down on the CP1 course, confined spaces 1, and then you go on to 2. But we take them down a Victoria sewer and everything. And claustrophobia, you'd be amazed the amount of people that don't realise they have it.
Yeah.
We've hired those on several occasions for different presentations. They were in-house kind of Investors Day presentations, but you can hire them. They're readily available. So yeah, it is a possibility.
Brilliant, fantastic. Well, let's get you thinking about this topic. You know, really important for the health and well-being of your staff. Really important for being at work at our best. And we've talked a lot about innovation and doing our best thinking. And certainly when we're in our optimal mental state, we're able to access the full capacity of our creativity, which I guess for this program is another lens you can look at that through. So Derek, I'm going to pass to you and just ask you to share your screen, or Karl, if you could, with the questions. But Derek, you know where people are going on the breakout rooms.